fascinating question. Matter of fact, after we were done in Albany today at the department, I had a little time because I knew I was coming here tonight. So rather than try to drive up and drive back, I decided to go over to the hearings. And if you haven't been to the hearings of the combined Senate Finance Committee hearings that they do, Assembly and Senate, it's really kind of an interesting dynamic. What do I think is really going to happen? It's hard to say exactly, but the one thing the governor has not done is in the past years, he's put some money on the table, but labeled it for other things. So 2 years ago, he put $250 million into the grants, and they used that money to increase it. Last year, they put in $200 million of fiscal stabilization money. That money was not put in this year. So the first question is, where's the obvious money, right? Because we've got $683 million and about $324 going to capital elimination adjustment. The rest going to some of the small programs, and of course the programs that are based on expenditures. I think that I'm hopeful. I mean, with what I heard today from some of the legislators, they certainly understand the issue. They understand where districts are. So I'm hoping that we can get up to that 1.2 or 1.3 million. But I'll tell you, billion. But that's going to be a real stretch, and it's going to be real difficult. And I'm not sure exactly where that money comes from. So I think that it would be unreasonable. I don't know if there's any will on the governor to go any higher than that.
Okay. Jim, your thoughts on this? Jim Baldwin.
Some of us have been around long enough to remember the days when the regents would come out with a very generous state aid proposal. The governor would come in short of that, and then the legislature would add. There was a court decision a number of years ago that really enhanced the power of the governor in the budget-making process. I think that there is this expectation that because it's an election year, there's going to be a lot of money on the table and they'll find a way to raise the money. I don't know where the money will come from. Jim mentioned that there was $200 million that the governor had put in the budget last year, fiscal stabilization. It was really money for the legislature to kind of, do what it wanted to do with. This year, that amount of money is somewhere in the neighborhood of $75 million. We estimate it would take $1.5 billion to maintain effort. The regents proposed $1.3 billion. The governor's real number is somewhere around $600 million because there's some capital money in there that's not going to be paid. I think if we get to $1 billion, we'll be lucky because I don't know where the legislature will find the money. And the way the budget game works today is that the legislature has to find money in order to add to the governor's budget, and they've got to get agreement from the governor. There are other issues that are going to come to bear on this. The governor wants ethics reform. There are things the governor wants the legislature has been reluctant to do. Maybe there'll be a deal, but I'm not thinking we're going to see a typical election year increase in school aid.
Chuck, what do you think?
What he said.
But
of course, I'll fill in a couple of spots here. For an election year budget, this is on average about 2.7% less than a typical election year budget would be for an increase in aid to education. I think this is going to be a bad year, and for a while, with the election year at hand, people were hoping that there was a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm concerned that it's the proverbial oncoming train at the end of the tunnel. This is not good because of all the things that Jim and Jim just said. The money isn't there unless there's some deal and they create a new pool of money. Then we're going to be in a really bad spot when this starts moving forward a little bit. The other important thing to keep in mind is that the vast majority of school districts in the state are still under what they were funded in the 08-09 school year. and we still have the GEA. So I'm gonna go to that automatically. The gap elimination adjustment was put in by Governor Patterson because the state had a gap in its budget. Where did the money come from? Well, a lot of the money came from education because that's where the money is. The fact is that now Governor Cuomo is talking about a budget surplus. They're talking about $2 billion in tax decreases and tax incentives, whatever it is over a period of time. That the gap that was there back years ago no longer exists, but the money that was taken from education years ago is still being taken. And there's not any sign that it's going to be put back in. And hopefully we will get to this point down the road. And now for the other side of it. I'm not necessarily a proponent of pumping large new amounts of money into education. I'm not. I'm a proponent of fixing a broken system. The system that we have in place right now is currently, it's not going to work for many more years. It's a house of cards that's going to fold unto itself. What has to happen is somebody has to have the political courage to step up and put in a system that sends the money to where it needs to be sent in an equitable sort of manner. We spend a lot of money on education in New York State. And the fact is, though, that it's not exactly equitably distributed.
I'm not sure I can explain why he's proposing it, but I'll try to explain it, at least as it's been described. I think what the governor is trying to do is to provide property tax relief to taxpayers, and he's made a strategic calculation that the best way to do that is to put pressure on school districts and local governments to stay within the tax levy cap, which is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.46, 1.5 this coming year, which is very low.
I thought it was a 2% cap.
Well,
Oh, all right.
so I think the idea here is to just apply pressure in a way where local taxpayers are going to demand that school districts do what the governor and other people at the state level have been asking them to do, suggesting that they do over a period of years. And that is, look at every opportunity to consolidate, especially your back office operations and those things where you have redundancy from district to district to district. Looking at it from their perspective, the state has provided BOCES aid for decades. And BOCES is, and it's not a commercial, it's reality. BOCES is the best example of inter-municipal cooperation in the state of New York. It's sustained, it works, the state has supported it. I think the state is in a place where, because of its own financial issues, because of economic development and the lack of jobs and business and so on, the state is in a place where it is going to shift the dynamics and say, look, we've held the carrot out there for years. Many of you have taken advantage of it, but you haven't gone far enough. So we're now going to bring out the big stick, and the big stick is your taxpayers won't get a rebate unless you figure out a way to cut costs by consolidating. And that is the message that I think is being sent loud and clear. The unfortunate part, I think, though, is that we are not being given the wherewithal to address the structural issues that exist that drive the costs that school districts incur. And that is the piece that we have advocated for. You've had the Swazi Commission, the London Commission, and now the Governor's Education Panel. I mean, very similar messages being sent. But the tools to enable us to actually deal with the structural issues have not been given to us.
Chuck, Jim, want to further comment on the tax rate proposal?
One other part of it I think is worth pointing out. because we have a school audience here. The first year of it only impacts schools, and that's because of the fiscal year for municipalities. With the fiscal year for municipalities kicking in on January 1, and the state's budget year kicking in April 1st, the first year of this plan would only impact school districts. The second year of the plan would impact school districts and municipalities. And that's something which, I just find interesting. Some people might say it's because of timing. Some people might say the timing is about something else.
Jim, anything?
The two pieces that I'd add is, I think I wouldn't get overly caught in the details of what year 2 and year 3 look like. I think the governor intentionally left a little ambiguity and some sense of, once the legislature gets a hold of it, if they're serious, we'll figure out the details of who does what and where the savings have to come from and how they're calculated. But I think the concept is the concept he really wants to push. The issue that I'm most concerned about with this is really the equity factor. If you really look at the amount of money that is raised and where the money will go, it's clearly going to push a lot of money downstate to more wealthy districts. So I look at one district I have, and everyone's got examples like this, but one of the districts I have is Argyle, a nice rural district in Washington County. They do a terrific job. 1.46 will raise $60,000 on the levy. You look at a comparable district in downstate where they may have the same number of kids, but 1.6% on the levy may raise $450,000, $500,000, $800,000 or more. And so what we're going to really do is say, okay, rather than take these poorer districts and we're going to give them the aid, really think about it, we're almost going to a completely regressive system in how we fund education. And really, when you think about it, well, where are the votes, where are the people? And I got to tell you, I'm not hearing a lot of negativity from legislators on this, because I think they like the idea of freezing property taxes, and I think we all know that one of the things that they hear all the time is property taxes. Now, you have the downstate constituency, and there's some talk about doing something on rentals and some other stuff, and to get the assembly on board. But I do think it's something we have to watch pretty carefully, because I do think it's terribly regressive, and I think really is hurtful to kids rather than trying to do something with the GEA if this money doesn't really exist. And I think like I said, I wouldn't get overly caught in the details, but I think people like the concept, so I think it's something we're going to have to watch pretty carefully.
That's very interesting.
And if I could on that, and I'm not disagreeing with Jim. I just want to expand on a point. I'm not hearing anything publicly negative from legislators, but I am hearing private stuff that is negative from legislators. But the fact is that this is the type of thing that for them to come out publicly against it, they'd be putting themselves on the line here. So privately, there's a lot of chatter. Publicly, this is a good idea. Okay.
Help the audience understand what it is, and
I'll credit Jim and I meet with representatives of NICET every month, and we were able to, I think we asked them about the UPK stuff, but we also got information from the State Education Department, got information from NISCUS, and it all seems to be about the same. Currently for half-day program, I believe the state funds it to the tune of about $375 million. I believe, I have all kinds of numbers running through my head. I believe that they put in another additional $375 million. During today's budget hearings, the commissioner was asked, okay, so if there's 375 in there now, and 375 was added, and we're talking about full day pre-K for all students, real universal pre-K, wouldn't that mean there would need to be another $750 million added in order to do this? And the commissioner said yes. So, so automatically, the idea of this pre-K funding creating a real universal pre-K program, it's not nearly enough money to create that kind of a program. And the other part of it is that they're only looking really at 4-year-olds. And the other part of it is, if you remember, there's still a lot of ambiguity on exactly would this be required, would it not be required, would kindergarten is a non-required grade, but pre-K would be required. What's the deal on that? So there's still a lot of questions out there on that, but the fact is there's not nearly enough money put in place to really fund a real UPK program.
Unless you want to cut kindergarten to fund pre-K.
Well, yeah, right. You know, and the problem with the current UPK is that a lot of times it has been a subsidy for the middle class, the current UPK program. Because what happens is the middle class people who live in a community who have a UPK program are the people that are fairly stable in that community. They live in that community, there's not a high mobility rate of the middle class or the upper middle class. They're aware of what's going on in the schools and they sign their kids up for the UPK programs. The people who this is really geared for, the Head Start families, people below the poverty level, they're much more mobile, especially in this region where we've got 3 or 4 counties that are bound next to each other. And by the time someone moves into Albany County from Rensselaer County and tries to sign up for the universal pre-K program, it's already filled. And who's it filled by? It's filled by people that used to send their kids to private pre-K programs and are now getting a subsidy from the taxpayers to send their kids to a public pre-K program. So it is not universal, it is pre-K, it is good, and there's not nearly enough money to pay for the real thing.
Okay.
A couple things. This came up quite a bit at the hearings today. The Chancellor did indicate that right now about 50,000 pre-K students are enrolled in their half-day pre-K program, and their goal is to get to about 70 to 75,000 full day. Certainly there's some politics, and everyone understands that the mayor has some other goals, maybe just beyond preschool itself. You know, a couple thoughts that go through my head is one of the things that we always do poorly in this state is everything's got to be a one-size-fits-all. And it just, you know, at some point it's like we need to give up the ghost on that, but we just can't. I think, you know, there are models that are effective. As a matter of fact, I remember in my former district where Darlene was, and actually came through the BOCES, we had a targeted preschool grant. And we knew who those kids were. We worked with the county, we knew. And it's like, we got those kids in. I think it makes sense for a targeted pre-K approach for maybe average need and low need districts to say, we're going to give you a certain amount of money, but we're going to allow you to do a targeted approach, allow you to fill so many slots and so many dollars. Also, I've been thinking a little bit about if we go to full day, who's going to pay for the special education costs for 4-year-olds? Well, I have just a funny feeling that that's going to shift. I just feel like the counties will be all over this. Say, yeah, what a great idea, let's get full day pre-K. And I know that's not the model we have right now, but I just worry that could eventually occur. And because we're expanding the charter, right? You're really expanding the charter, who we serve and what's aided. So if that's what's aided, why wouldn't they say, well, those special education costs are now at the district's behalf? So there's a little bit of a cost shift there. And, you know, we'll see what happens. But is the goal really here to deliver UPK across the state? I mean, it's not possible with the money they have. So, you know, it's hard to know. This one's got a lot of politics, a lot of politics in it.
Jim, any additional thoughts?
Yeah, I guess the thing that I look at is the coherence or lack thereof. You know, when you look at public policy, you look at education policy, you look for some sense of coherence. And where we are right now, we find ourselves in a situation where the system we have is not sustainable under current circumstances. And it is not being funded at a level that requires it to be funded in order to even sustain what we're doing now. So you have that situation. And there's lots of issues around how you address that. And then we're looking at a pre-K program, which is politically very popular. And certainly from the research perspective, a high-quality pre-K program will make a difference in the lives of children. But we're looking to somehow graft it onto a system that is essentially spent. I don't know how you do that successfully. And one of the estimates is that with 2-year pre-K, fully implemented, it's a $4 billion expense per year. Where does that money come from? And then in addition to that, we have this other thing called the $2 billion bond issue that proposes to borrow money to buy, to the extent you're buying wiring and you're buying this capital investment that has a useful life of many, many years, great. But I think it just strikes people as odd that we would borrow billions of dollars to buy laptops or to buy iPads. There's some lack of coherence here. We are not addressing the fundamental issues in our system, and yet we're talking about very high-priced items. May not be this year, may not be next year, but in the out years, $4 billion for universal pre-K, 3rd and 4th grade.
I think the value is certainly more downstate in New York City, Buffalo, some of the urban areas where they really are struggling to get high quality internet. There's still areas where, we had some people down at P-Tech recently because we have an early college high school, we have a P-Tech grant, and they said, there was computers in one room and they were bolted to the desk, and really if you look across many of the inner city areas, there is not a lot of technology in place, but I worry that yes, we'll have a lot of money, a lot of stuff will get purchased, but technology is still a tool for instruction. And when I really look at districts who do it well, they really plan. They know what outcomes they want to have. They know what they want kids to produce using technology. It's not as simple as just having the technology. And I worry of these headlines of just seeing boxes and boxes of computers that have sat there for 8 months and no one's opened, and there's no blue Cat5 place to put it in, or wireless hubs or anything of that sort. And then 4 years later, this equipment's no longer good. We've bonded for a 30-year for a 4-year expense. I can't even believe like Moody's and that kind of stuff would even allow for that. And of course, there's also a piece that you can build rooms for preschool as part of that money. So, I like the idea of infusing technology. I think technology is a really incredible tool. But there is aid available through BOCES. There's maybe there's some things that they could do there where the large cities could buy an aid, maybe get some aid through the BOCES or the RICs or those type of things for technology services. That really is a comprehensive plan for how they want to use technology. So it sounds good. I think it's got problems written all over it. I think it's got bad headlines written all over it. With that being said, it is a little bit of a steamroller, and we'll see how much legs this have. But when I heard the committee today, I heard that joint committee saying, this is wonderful, this is great. The people who testified today, this is going to be great. This is going to be revolutionize education. And I just think we never think about outcomes, what we want to have, and how we get to those outcomes. We never have the hard discussions about who's doing what, why, and how. And so, we'll spend $2 billion or $1.5 billion. We'll have a lot of new vendors emailing you all, and whether or not it makes a difference, I really worry about it.
Chuck, your thoughts on the technology initiative?
Jim covered it well.
People were shocked at the numbers that came out, more shocked at the runs. Certainly the amortization really kicking in this year, not being present on the runs is a real concern. People have cut a lot, so what I'm hearing is we have really cut into our program. We don't feel comfortable cutting anymore. And I think their sense was there was gonna be some more money allocated, right, wrong, or indifferent. I think that was the sense, election year, that's what I think most of us felt was probably gonna happen. I think if it stands that not much is restored, I think it's gonna be a very, very significant issue for many districts, because it's a long-term sustainability. It's not even the 1 year, it's a long-term sustainability. That's the bigger problem. What happens next year? And I think on the surface, just getting through this 1 year, and then why districts try to develop longer plans to try to either share more services or do more things for greater efficiencies. I think it's gonna be a really, really difficult year if things stay like they are. If they come through with money, then we'll have to see what it is and what the impact would be. But I'm hearing a lot of concern, universal.
Jim, how about your region?
I would say essentially the same. Some districts are better able to withstand another tough year than others, but I have some districts that are in very marginal shape financially right now. They've cut their high school program pretty much to the bare minimum. And really for some of these districts, there are very few places to turn in terms of looking for other places to cut. And without some vehicle for doing the kind of restructuring that probably needs to happen in the system, I think we will see districts just be unable to pay the bills. And it might not happen in the next year, but certainly the year after that or the year after that. The controller's analysis should be sobering. Number of districts listed there who are very marginal financially. And the state has no plan as to how to address those kinds of situations. We had 2 special ag school districts go belly up in the last few years, and essentially nothing has been done to address the obligations of those special ag school districts. That is very disturbing, because there was a time when the state of New York would never have allowed a political subdivision to do that. And to me, it is a precedent that should send chills through everyone, but especially those of us who are charged with the responsibility of providing an educational system for our children.
Chuck, how about your region?
Well, we have Dr. Kaplan from Waterloo, the
Poster child.
the #1 fiscally stressed district in the state, according to the Comptroller's office. And the fact is that, our rural districts that are down in Schoharie County by 20–25% in student population over the course of the past 10 years, they're facing a different kind of crisis. They're facing a crisis of how do you serve a rural population in an incredibly large geographic area. You can't, it's hard to put a whole school of kids on a bus for an hour and a half in the morning, an hour and a half in the afternoon.
In my region, I think we have done a fairly good job at the elementary level reaching teachers. We, for our 23 districts, they receive somewhere in the neighborhood of $400,000 a year. We had already shifted to an embedded professional development program, and basically, with the leadership of our superintendent's Race to the Top committee, we used the Race to the Top money to expand that. So, we feel pretty good about the fact that we've got a network of 20-some subject matter experts at work in classrooms throughout our region. And while I think we'll feel a little bit of a drop, there's a very high level of district commitment to the work that we're doing so far. At the high school level, I think we have made very little progress. There's been very little focus, generally, I think, at the high school level. In terms of the Common Core, I don't know that you will see a shift away from the Common Core. I think if I were in a position to make decisions, what I would do is time the assessments in such a way that you probably would give schools, you know, a 2 to 3 year lead before you shift to a Common Core assessment, so that there is just some time. I mean, you know, the thing that I think is just so frustrating for those of us who are trying to support schools and help them get through this is that you know, sometimes it feels like just because somebody said something in Albany, it's going to happen in the classroom. And that is not the way it works, because we have a very complex system that we're managing. And there just seems to be a lack of understanding of the complexity of the implementation of these initiatives. And you know, the sad thing is, I believe the conversations since the reform agenda was rolled out have shifted very much in the right direction, and not only in the faculty meeting or in the classroom or in the superintendent's office, but at board meetings. I visit my component boards on a regular basis, and the conversations that we're having are very different from the ones that we had, you know, 6 years ago. So that's good. What I worry about is that it's all put at risk because of the way in which it's being implemented and the time frames that have been attached to it.
Chuck, current and future state of Common Core?
Back three or 4 months ago, I heard it referred to as Obama Core. When I heard it phrased as Obama Core, I knew we were in trouble. But I also have to say that that's when I became more supportive than ever before. Because what I saw was, I saw the politicization of something which, in my opinion, shouldn't necessarily be brought into the political realm. When I heard that there were certain deep-pocketed individuals who were spending hundreds of $1 million on efforts to get rid of the Common Core, get rid of teacher tenure, and put vouchers in place, I knew immediately that the Common Core was for me. And I have to say that up to that point, I was one of those people that I wanted to see a little bit of data first. I'm fine with trying something, but I became more sure than ever that we needed to give this a try. I have a lot of political concerns about this, because what I see are some really strange bedfellows in this. I see far left groups and far right groups that are coalescing around an anti-Common Core message. When the far left groups actually, it's not as much the Common Core as it is the implementation of the Common Core, the attachment of high stakes testing to the Common Core, and the rush to test on the Common Core. And I wish they could be a little bit more clear on that. And I think that the far right groups, it's not really about the Common Core, it's about the opportunity to see it as a vehicle to move a political agenda forward, hence Obama Core. So I think that we are in for some really interesting politics on this. I think over the course of the next, this year, in New York State, you're going to see a lot of interesting politics on this. And I wish that people wouldn't, but of course, like I said, as soon as I heard Obama Core, I knew it was going to happen. What has to happen in order to make this work is that those things that have been attached to the Common Core have to be separated from it. Jim suggested a few-year implementation period. One of the things that we heard was the idea of kids in 3rd grade this year. Next year would be kids in 3rd and 4th grade. The following year would be kids in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. But I'll tell you the commissioner's view on that. The commissioner's view on that is the more we postpone it, what you don't think next year when we get to the next one, somebody's not going to complain about it. Therefore, we need to move ahead and get this done. I tend to think that things have to be put in place first, like the training of teachers, and that's how I'll finish this part of it. One of the things that I saw, again, I'll agree with Jim Baldwin completely on this. I saw a high school math course being taught, a Common Core high school math course. And what I saw was a teacher that took off of Engage New York a module and was teaching that module. The trouble is they were teaching it in a totally traditional way, using the same tricks of the trade that are used by math teachers in high school classes all across the state.
Do they have an overhead projector?
Yes, they did.
That's
Yes, they did. I swear they did. They had a smart board that they were essentially using as an overhead. I said to somebody, I said to the person I was with on the way out, you know who that person is, Kim. I said to her on the way out, the only thing I didn't see was them handing out dittos and the kids smelling them. So we have to, unless, that's a real issue. And now we're talking about Common Core Regents examinations for kids who have been taught, air quotes, Common Core, but really haven't been taught Common Core. It's scary.
Jim Dexter, current implementation in your region and your thoughts on where we're going from here.
I have a lot of different things to say. These two gentlemen, I agree, high school is really the problem as far as how far we've reached. And some of it was, we tried to get to the elementary and middle school first. So part of it's just inherent with, we can only do so many things at once and get to so many people. I think there's a couple things that we probably will need to get this right. And one of them I really believe is the career ladder approach that is put in place, because really our principals, they're doing more with instruction they've ever done, but really they're doing more APPR, rubrics and SLOs and those type of things. But we really don't have that teacher-mentor type of relationship that we really need to get people to give good and honest feedback. And I really believe that that career ladder, if done correctly, not like the mentoring program that was put in place several years, but if you really had criteria, some kind of an outside credential, and people could actually have an advanced standing within the teacher ranks, I really think that would be really helpful. But I'm just not sure if the money comes to do something like that. But I really think that I'm a big fan of that. And I think to get to the next level, we're going to have more than just the people who can follow. Right now, you have a lot of people who are using the modules, and I think I have seen really good things happening. I think teachers, I know there's some political pressure to say this is all terrible, but I've seen some incredible things happening. There's some incredible teaching, and people should be proud of that, and they should be okay with saying that we've grown as a profession. We know math, common vocabulary, common understanding, common assignments, all those things, are really good, and the modules, although they're not perfect, they really truly define the scope of the learning. The other thing I see it as a little bit of from the parent perspective, which, as we all know, sometimes we see the system a little bit differently from the parent perspective as we do from the educator perspective. And I have a 5th grader, and I'll tell you, when she's doing math, and the way she does the fractions in so many different ways, and she does the fractions against the dollars, against the time, against the percentages, I'm like, she understands this. We gotta remember there's some good in this. So the future of Common Core, I think there's some national politics, there's some state politics. I do believe that the legislature will try to take some air out of the system. I do believe they'll probably try to do something on the APPR. I think that's where they'll end up. I think Common Core will stay where it is. But I do think that there's going to be a push to have more options for curriculum modules, whether it's statewide teacher developed or something. There's going to be something beyond just the modules that are there. But I think the standards themselves, and I've also seen some great practices where teachers will say, I've heard them say, we're gonna have a PLC that meets every Thursday, we're gonna go over the next week of the assignments and what needs to get done. I mean, real strategies like that. And I've also heard something kind of unique. I've heard people say, teachers who sometimes have struggled with the nebulousness of standards education, they actually like this because they feel for the, that like I get a sense of what I'm supposed to be teaching. Now that doesn't mean that it will take us to an extraordinarily high level. Scripting is not the answer either. Outcomes, what we want to achieve for the children, of course, are the most important. But I do think that Common Core, if it can survive the national challenge, I do think it will stay in New York. But I do think that we won't get to the next level until we get really the teacher leadership and the teacher buy-in, or else it will just be a series of things that some people do well and some people don't do well at all, and then we'll have another set of problems that we haven't encountered yet.
Okay, so now that we've solved Common Core.
Let's
go
say
to
something. I thought that of all of the components of the reform agenda, the career ladder was like the highest leverage piece of it, because it would reward professional growth. And if you think about our schools, that's what we need to do. We need to recognize teacher leaders and find ways to recognize them both in terms of compensation and in terms of title and other ways. To me, that has the greatest potential to transform what happens in schools. And my fear is it probably ends up lost in all of this.
Maybe we could use standardized testing somehow to do that. I agree. It has the most potential of anything, and it seems to be caught right now in the governor's $20,000, again, waving a big sum of money. But you're absolutely right on that.
Well, and I think those of us who remember the EIT excellence in teaching debacle.
I received
a
EIT
lot of
with the
concern.
I was on that side of the table on that,
So
yes.
I just feel that that's something that we shouldn't lose here, because ultimately, you've got to have teachers in a place where they can deliver the program that you want to deliver. And I think that has received short shrift in all of this.
Current nutrition.
I think APPR is too complex. I think that I've always felt that if people cannot understand how they're being evaluated, that the evaluation system ultimately won't mean anything to them. I think that the piece related to the rubrics, we use the thoughtful classroom rubric in our BOCES. I think that's been a very positive learning experience for our principals and our teachers. The piece connected to the assessments has been incredibly confusing. People do not understand how they ended up with the state score they ended up with. And as a result, there is a lack of confidence in the system. I think what's happened with APPR is that it has been very much dependent upon the way that the administration in a BOCES or a school district has addressed it. Our approach has been to work collegially with our Teachers Association and really to be partners with them in trying to navigate through this process. And that has worked. I don't think there will be legislative changes in the APPR because the governor views it as one of his signature accomplishments. And I just think there's going to be a great deal of reluctance to reopen that issue. So, the department may look to see where they can kind of tinker around the edges, but I don't know that anybody is going to want to reopen APPR, especially in an election year.
Chuck, APPR.
Without naming the person, this is the comment that I received. This was back a few months ago. And for those of us in the room that have lived this, we understand the folly of this comment. The comment was, the great thing about the system that we have in place now is we're going to be able to compare teachers across the state. We're gonna be able to look at teachers in Schenectady and compare them to teachers in Albany. We're gonna be able to look at fill in the blank, fill in the blank, fill in the blank. And my answer was, no, you're not. Why not? We have this, because each of the 700 school districts in New York State has their own individually negotiated APPR plan. And where one of my component districts, a small district, about a quarter of their teachers are on tips. There's another larger district with hundreds of teachers, and all but 2 of their teachers were either in the highest or second highest level of performance. The fact, and there are a lot of governmental leaders running around patting themselves on the back because of this great system that has been implemented. The fact is, we do need to be taking a critical look at our teachers, but the current system doesn't really do that. Final part on it. Part of the regulation says that we can use the information that we gather from these annual professional performance reviews to use an expedited 3020A action against a teacher. Jim Baldwin and I were talking about this afternoon. I think probably there will be very few cases of someone deciding to do that. And as a matter of fact, probably very foolish people will choose to do that because of the potential lawsuits they're going to be facing because of the black box of where this all comes from. The fact is, I'll say it to you, the people who are school administrators, we know who the really good teachers are, we know who the ones are that aren't that good. We are partially responsible for this because we haven't done enough to address those ones that we know aren't good enough. This is partially our fault because we've allowed the stuff to keep happening the way it is. And you can hide behind all you want about, oh, the APPR, it costs $200,000 to get rid of a teacher. The lawyer who made up that lie happens to work for me right now. The fact is that was a made up story by a lawyer for the New York State United Teachers in order to get people not to do a 3020A. He just threw out a number and it stuck. He's now a lawyer at Kappa Region BOCES. He'll tell you it doesn't cost $250,000. So the point is, administrators, we have to take some responsibility in this. We've got what we've got now, and I'm concerned that it's not going to change because of what Jim Baldwin said. I mean, the governor mentioned it as in his State of the State address as one of his accomplishments. That's not changing.
Jim Dexter.
We know how to check boxes off as good as anyone. We check our boxes off, meet our minimum standards, we're good to go. I don't really have much else to say except that, I do think the 60% is Chuck alluded to this, we should have been there, probably the research was there 5 to 7 years ago. We really should have been having those great discussions on I look at some of the things we've done across the state and I think about the amount of training we've done for our administrators on evaluation, watching videos, having great discussions about what do we see, putting those in context, training people against the rubrics. I think that's incredible work that we should have been doing years ago as a state. But here we are. I don't see it changing. It's so complex, and the quality is so different wherever you go. I just think that no one will want to touch it there'll be a natural lifespan, and then something will happen, and there'll be some political impetus to touch it. Maybe at that point we'll get it right. But the amount of resources, time, and just space it takes of everyone, the unions, the administrators, to get to do this. I think we'll end up just being in compliance mode, and I'm just hoping that we really do as good a job as we can in really helping people grow as a profession. I still think if we look at that bottom line, that's really what it's designed to do, help people truly grow as a profession. I think we'll be in a better spot if we try to use it as a punitive tool, because if you look at it from a punitive tool, there are so many holes. I mean, if I was doing a defense for a teacher, it wouldn't take me 40 seconds to figure out where I'd start asking all the questions. And so I do think it's going to stay as is. We've learned how to check the box. We know how to submit our review room. We're good. It's been fixed, and kind of sad.
Yeah, I think, in spite of what we have to do to comply, we need to look at the transformational potential of this and try to bring that to life in our own school communities. And, that to me is really the work of the local school superintendent, the BOCES. The state, because public policy is a blunt instrument, always forces us into this compliance mode. And what I really have enjoyed about this last couple of years, we created a committee of superintendents who have led implementation of Race to the Top in our region. And they have focused on the transformational aspects. And it's not always easy, but I just feel very good about that. And it may be in spite of everything else, but to me, that's the work of the local school leader.
Well, I know that there's a lot of pressure on the Board of Regents right now. One of the regents from out in the Buffalo region recently had picketers at his house. And stuff like that is a shame. He's a good person, a good regent, cares about kids, cares about education. I know that various groups from around the state are targeting individual regents to try to affect change. I also know that there's a lot of talk about maybe a turnover on the Board of Regents because some regents aren't, the feeling is that some regents aren't necessarily speaking up enough or going against what's being done. One of the big issues, the state education department is in a weird situation. And again, I'm going to speak to something my colleague knows a lot more on this than I do, having worked in state government. But the fact is that the state education department doesn't come under the governor's control. It comes under the legislature's control, which is primarily controlled by the Assembly Democrats, who are primarily from New York City. So, and their budget is, though, controlled by, in a sense, the governor, because the governor has the most control of the budget. So the state education department is very gun-shy to go against the governor or the executive branch at all, for that matter, and they're beholden to the legislature. So there's a strange dynamic in Albany when it comes to our state education department, which is supposed to be this independent agency, which is really beholden to a couple of spots. I think that you're going to see more action on the part of individual regent members over the course of the next few months, because they're being poked and they're being prodded to do something. But again, keep in mind of the majority of the Board of Regents members, they are from the city and from the Big Four. So they're not necessarily representative of the people in this room. So how much they're getting poked and prodded is a question that I'm not sure about. A lot of the stuff that we've talked about in terms of policy, I don't see it changing. I see it. I see this as a road we're going down, and it's probably not going to change. But again, educators have this weird way of making do with what we're given and figuring out a way to do it. I still think we're in this transformational stage, and we will get there. There may be a few more bumps in the road, and I think there's gonna be some major financial bumps in the road, but I do believe we will get there.
Dexter, your thoughts on SED, the Regents role?
Tremendous pressure from the outside. I mean, you can really see it from every angle. And you can see that. I was at the Board of Regents meeting, was it last week or the week before, whatever it was, and 2 weeks ago, I guess. And you could just see them being much more deliberate and really saying, do we truly understand here what we're doing and the implications? I mean, those are the words they said, because we've done things before, and then we've come back, months or a year later and found out that the implications were a little bit different than we thought. So I think you're going to see them slow down on a number of policy issues, and I think they're going to be hesitant to move on a lot of things. I think the thing that troubles me a little bit is there's so much more. I think we have to redefine a little bit the high school experience. And it's not just about the Common Core, it's not just about APPR, it's not just about these charts. I mean, really, what do we want the high school and the career preparation, the college preparation to be? And I think all of us would agree that we really need to do some work at the high school level. And I think it's going to be very, very hard to talk about anything innovative, to talk about different pathways, to talk about more early college, high school models, to talk about all sorts of things, because right now we're kind of stuck in this mentality, and I think people are going to be afraid to step out of the box, both the Board of Regents and to some degree the department staff, because certainly everything they do now will be looked at a little bit differently. So I do think that there's enormous pressure on the board, and I think to some degree there'll be more. Like I said, they're going to spend more time on issues, but we're also not going to be able to get to some other issues that I think some of us would like to see us address.
Jim, your thoughts?
What I worry about is the capacity of the institution to really provide leadership. And I think that, the biggest part of leadership is your moral authority and the sort of the informal authority that you build through relationships and through the expectations that you develop with others. I worry that the institution has been very seriously weakened. I believe it has over-relied on its formal authority, on its regulatory authority, and when you look at the long-term implications, we have had a very strong, proud tradition of educational leadership in New York State. Not that anything was ever perfect, but I'm concerned that moral authority has been eroded of late. And it takes a long time to get that back. And the department itself has been in many ways eviscerated as a result of really not being owned by the governor or really owned by anyone. And that is very sad to see.
I'm hoping that we'll be able to look back a few years from now and say we went through some really rocky times, but we're better off than we were. I'm not sure how true or not true that will be, but that's my hope. I do think we're in a time of enormous change. I personally struggle with, to the degree that we're doing things at a federal level. I can really see it a lot now. I mean, almost everything we do, we have to ask permission. And I worry that we don't have enough ability to innovate, to really say what do we want for our kids. It's all about, the more that you get involved with the federal government, the more you can just see the litigation possibilities, other things. And I'm not saying there shouldn't be any regulatory involvement from the federal U.S. Department of Education, but we're leaning towards areas that are starting to concern me. New areas of accountability. They're talking about things that I think would would shock some people as far as what we may be accountable for. And I just think like, at some point we need to be able to stop and just say, what is it that we still want for our kids? And right now, I think we're just in so much of a political situation that it's hard for us to do that. So I'm hoping we can get through this, and then I'm worried that we're kind of in a bad spot right now in education from a policy perspective, but I hope to be proven wrong on that.
Jim, Joe?
Little Monty Python, every village used to have an idiot. The trouble is the internet has brought them all together. I have a friend now who's a teacher in a nearby school, and when he goes into Cumberland Farms in the morning to pick up his coffee, he takes his badge off and puts it in his pocket, because he doesn't want people to see that he's a teacher in that school district. Why? Because people have commented to him about, the badge and him being a teacher. Being a teacher, being a principal, or being a superintendent, it shouldn't be an embarrassment. It should be a great thing. It should be something that we want the best and the brightest to strive for. I'm concerned about a lot of things that, because of a societal influence, because of politics, because of EdTPA, because of lots of different things, the best and the brightest aren't choosing to be teachers. Just the one more story that I'll finish with. A young lady that I really wanted to become a math teacher, close friends of our family, with this family. She wanted to be a math teacher or an architect. I kept on trying to talk her into being a math teacher. Her family wanted her to be an architect. By the way, it's almost as hard to become an architect now as it is to get a job as a teacher. Getting a job as an architect is not easy right now. But she chose to be an architect because her family didn't want her to become a teacher. They kept on, no, architecture, architecture, architecture. If we don't change the dialogue, the people that are doing this, that are in the field, we've got to stand up to the bullies. We've got to stand up to the people that are running down what we do. And we've got to do the right thing, too. We've got to do the right thing. But the fact is that until we continuously make sure that we're doing the right thing, that the Katies of the world are going to become architects, and we're going to lose a really good generation of people that should be teachers. I want to get to the point where the teacher can wear the badge into Cumberland Farms, and people will go, way to go, again, like it was before. I think with the right kind of leadership, we can get there. Right now, we don't have that kind of leadership. It goes to what we're talking about, a moral authority here, and we really need that.
I'm optimistic, because ultimately, I think reason will prevail. Democracy is a sloppy process, and there's a lot of ambiguity. And we're somewhere, in the muck right now. I think we're going to sort these issues out, and the political process will do that. And ultimately, students will come to school, teachers will teach, principals will lead, because that's why they're in the business. So.